Continuing on in our discussion, we will talk about Hale Kuamoʻo and Ulukau Hawaiian Digital Library. School-based language and culture revitalization require resources based in a worldview, culture, and history emanating from the indigenous language. This panel focuses on the importance and access to such resources for enhancing a just education for children, families, and communities. Joining us for this discussion is Dr. Larry Kimura. He was the first president of the Ahapunaleo board. He continues as a board member to this day and is a Kahaka'ula Ke'elikolani College of Hawaiian Language professor. Aloha e kumulale.
Aloha no kako, pea oi ku'ule, ke...
Mahalo nui. Along with us is Ke Kaianiani Irwin. He is the curriculum and evaluation manager at Hale Kuamo'o. Aloha nui Ke Kaianiani.
Aloha kako.
Mahalo, mahalo to the two of you for joining in this conversation. I kind of want to just start off asking the two of you to share a little bit more about what you do. So if you can share and explain the programs that you are involved in relative to activities involving Hawaiian language and culture revitalization that go beyond teaching in the classroom. And maybe we can start off with Ke Kaianiani and then follow up with Larry.
Iki no, aloha nui kako o waukia o Ke Kaianiani Irwin. And I came to this work initially through 12 years working as a Hawaiian medium teacher, mainly grades 3 through 6 at 3 different schools on 2 different islands. And so I know firsthand the needs that are there for more resources and of all kinds. And that's the main focus of the Hale Kuamo'o Hawaiian Language Center. Was founded with the purpose of providing support, services, and resources to all of Hawaii, anybody interested in Hawaiian language, but realistically, the main focus is on our K through 12 Hawaiian medium schools on all of the major islands. So that's what we do at the Hale Kuamo'o.
Yeah, oi, Larry.
Oh, okay, mahalo. I I hope I understood your anyway. I'm being taken back to the days of when we first began our 40 years ago with our preschools, Ahapunaleo, and we had no curriculum. So we were gathering things as fast as we could put together. Lots of that was entailing just translations. You know, we go to the Salvation Army bookstore and buy books for 10 cents and do the translations into Hawaiian and cut and paste, okiatuku, as you used to say. And this would entail all our parents and, of course, our teachers, as many hands as we could get to help us create curriculum. And, of course, this led to eventually our first graduating classes from the preschool setting, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and we wanted them to get into the public school, which is the Department of Education, and initiate and to start the first Hawaiian medium education program through the state funding. They pay for it because the preschool until today is a private business. But we were lucky enough to convince our legislators and our Department of Education, with the help I heard a little earlier, of course, of Dorothy Lazar, Timothy Karetu, Tamati Rini, these names, so many people involved in supporting this initial establishment. And of course, with the start of the Hawaiian medium, or what they call Hawaiian immersion in the DOE, that means the DOE said, we have no curriculum, we have no teachers, who's going to do that? And of course, Punana said, we will do it. And that's how we continue to pursue. And this led to coming up with new words for curriculum that we had to bring forward from the days of Lahaina Luna School, you know, established back in 31, was it? And coming to the Kingdom of Hawaii, and then the end of our independent country, and then the establishment of this bill, this law saying that we can no longer use Hawaiian as the medium of education. And here we go, starting up in 1987. And so we started to do the best we could because we promised the DOE we're going to do this as a team, a small little group of parents, of teachers that just got started. And we used to meet, and we called our program ʻŌlelo, a living language, and we would gather as teachers, as faculty from the university, because we were at the university, so we had this connection, the development together, and of course our very supportive parent and community people to move this forward. And then the Leola programs we would hold during the summer times or even on weekends whenever we could develop curriculum. And this eventually led to what we call our Hawaiian philosophy of education, the Kumuhonua Mauliola. So it's not just about the language, but the language goes together with who we are as a people and our perspective and our way of seeing education for our children through our language. And then, of course, I was getting involved with, well, I mean, I could get into this later, but the establishment of the Hale Kuamo'o itself, started with, would you like me to continue on that?
Yeah, that's actually where I was gonna go to. So if you can share, the creation of Hale Kuamo'o, its support on a state level, and then maybe when you're makoko, we can toss it over to Kekaianiani to talk about things that are happening currently at Hale Kuamo'o.
Okay, well, because of Congress, our United States Congress, how this came about, I'm not exactly sure, but I know there was a renaissance of reawakening of Hawaiian culture in Hawaii from the late 1960s into the 70s and 80s. So in 1980, Congress passed this, I guess you could say, law to establish a commission to conduct a study of the culture and needs of the concerns of Native Hawaiians. So this commission was named the Native Hawaiian Study Commission, and that was in 1980. And lots of Hawaiian people were providing testimony to this commission. And so I went one evening at the Kapalama. At that time I was on Oahu. Went to Kapalama School that evening at their cafeteria, presented my testimony entirely in Hawaiian, because I wanted to have Mrs. Nakor was in attendance, thank goodness, so she could be a translator in case there were any questions, because my emphasis was to establish that eho kumu, that an office should be established, and I had a name for it already, and that name would be Hale Kuamo'o. And the main mandate of this Hale Kuamo'o would be to create Hawaiian curriculum in Hawaiian language, of course, for a Hawaiian medium educate. Well, I wanted to make sure we could have some strong foundations for Hawaiian language learning. And of course, later on, the development of this center, as we call the Hawaiian Language Center, the Hale Kuamo'o, also included many other kinds of mandates, including teacher preparation connected to curriculum development. And that was in 1982. But in 1983, we started the Ahapunana Leo 40 years ago, right, today. And so that, as I mentioned earlier, led to the establishment of the Hawaiian immersion programs in the public school system in 1987. So the legislature was convinced, hopefully, and they were, of course, in 1989 to pass a law to establish a budget, I should say, to establish a Hawaiian Language Center at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and that was HB 135, and provide 2 full-time positions, online positions. But the budget also included the building of a portable building no plumbing as it stands today. Uh, but we share the bathrooms at the College of Agriculture. But um, it's still in operation till today. But that was back in 1989, and the building was that portable was done in 1990. And so this is when I moved to Hilo. I was in the Manoa campus at the University of Hawaii in Manoa for 17 years, and now I've moved here to Hilo, and I'm still going teaching at the University of Hawaii, and many things have happened at our program at the university level at Hilo. So that's a brief, fast rundown of this establishment of the Hale Kuamo'o. And then, of course, the work of Hale Kuamo'o is so timely uh, at the time of, the starting of the DOE program in 1987, but Hale Kuamo'o finally came about in 89, 90. But still, there was still a lot of work being done at the pioneering level with just a small group of people, small batch of students and teachers. But of course, now we've come into 2023.
Mahalo nui, Larry. Ke Kaianiani, can you speak a little bit about what has been most recent on Hale Kuamo'o's docket of projects and curriculum offerings for the state?
Absolutely. I want to also take a moment just to mahalo Larry for his vision. You know, in so many ways, Larry has laid the foundation for everything we do at Hale Kuamo'o and many of the things we do throughout our whole Hawaiian revitalization movement. So I pasted several links into our chat, including our Instagram, where if you look around enough, you may find that speech that Larry referenced, where he was testifying before that commission to with his vision to create a center to develop resources for the revitalization of the Hawaiian language. And that vision is so important because, last week we met with the coalition of Hawaiian medium schools from around the country, and some of them do have something like this curriculum development center, but many don't, and they know they need these things, but they maybe don't have the infrastructure in place to work on them. So, in terms of the theme of this session of justice, just having, I believe that vision of having a center like that is really important, not only for Hawaiian revitalization, but for many other languages. Getting back to your question, Ku'ule, one of our more recent projects that I'll talk about is called Kukulu Kumohana. And in that project, we created an amazing amount of work and an amazing number of people, hands, that contributed to this work. I counted it, it came out to around 50 at least. 50 people involved in helping us with their subject matter expertise, their Hawaiian language expertise, teachers in the classroom who piloted our books and our curriculum and created curriculum. Our Kahua Viola director got very intimately involved in teacher training with us, including a 4-credit summer course. So we created 40 leveled readers from kindergarten through 3rd grade, 2 sets of 20 books leveled from the lowest level at kindergarten all the way to the highest readers in 3rd grade. And in preparing for this, I talked with our team, and one of my coworkers, Kealoha Paole Ahuna, talked about how he has several children now who are learning from these books that he helped to create, which to me is a major win. Earlier in Larry alluded to this, picking up the books from Salvation Army, doing the translations maybe the night before they're going to be used and cutting and pasting them into the book. So that was kind of like the early stages of resource development out of necessity, the quickest, most readily available thing. Those books tended not to be culturally, relevant or culturally vital, like what we were able to create for this Kukulu Kumohana project. The books were in sets, so ranging from the various meanings of piko, in Hawaiian language, so many meanings for the word piko, to a series on taken from our Hawaiian language traditional newspapers from the 19th century about ali'i from various different islands, and on to the third grade set where we featured role models of contemporary and more historical Hawaiian leaders, including a really important leader, George Helm. And I wanted to mention we were going to have a third panelist here today, but he's at a funeral related to George Helm and the whole Kaho'olawe movement. Emeraluli, he couldn't make it today, but what I'm trying to say is that having the ability to create these materials from the ground up through the Hawaiian language and a Hawaiian cultural sensibility and worldview, for my coworker Kealoha, it's just a wonderful feeling to see his children learning that way, and it's a huge progression from where we began, and no doubt there are many steps to go to get where we ultimately want to be. But yeah, I think lava kela no kamanava.
No, my Kailoa, I think it's great to hear, Larry talking about how Hale Kuamo'o began, and the okituku, or the cutting and pasting of words, on top of the books that were available at the time. Being a student who saw that growing up too, it's bringing back all these memories and labor of love, actually, that comes from the families and the teachers. And if I remember correctly, Hale Kuamo'o in the beginning, some of their employees were students at the university themselves, and they were the ones, creating articles or creating books and using their language learning skills at the university level to create curriculum to then go back into the classrooms to support these teachers. It's a really beautiful cycle. But then also, I think there was a mention in the chat too on how Hale Kuamo'o is, on site on the campus, relatively close to Hale ʻŌlelo, but then being able to have that connection to work on site and to still pull in students from the university to develop curriculum just adds to that workforce, I guess, if you will. I wanted to ask a question about the type of specific hua or products that are coming out of Hale Kuamo'o. And Kikayanini, you mentioned briefly about it, but if you can share a little bit more, and then also if we can reserve one of the products about Kani Āina for Kumulale after. But Kikayanini, if you can elaborate a little bit more on the products, and then we'll go over to Kumulale about Kani Āina.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mentioned Kealoha Paole. He is a student. We have two graduate students, three graduate students and two undergraduate students right now. And so that project that I mentioned, in addition to creating print books for those two sets, we also created audio ebooks with the interactive ebooks, which exported as EPUB or PDF, so that you can hear really solid sound models of strong Hawaiian fluency, both narrating the books and also performing songs and chants within the books. And so that's something that was very useful. We got a lot of positive feedback from Kumu, from teachers in the program across the islands during the pandemic, when there was a strong need for online learning resources, remote learning resources. These books are easily shareable through a Google Drive or through email attachments, and they were shared both with students and parents, so they could be used for literacy support in the ohana, particularly for students who might have learning challenges. They could read these books together with their parents or somebody in their ohana. And then I also mentioned having curriculum units that supported the teaching of the books. So we developed these with the help of teachers throughout the different schools around the islands. And they were made available through a Padlet site. It's like a website, but it's well organized to share resources like that are easily scanned through and downloaded. And I mentioned a little bit about our 4-credit summer course that took place at the end of that project. And we had about 10 teachers who came in, practicing classroom teachers who came in and took this course with Kanani Nohea Makaimoku, who guided them through the unit planning process. And above and beyond that, so they created really wonderful units that could be shared with all other kumu at their grade level. But for some of them, and this is, we find to be true when we do have teacher training workshops, but the time they have to meet and share, share notes and share experiences with their colleagues is really, really precious. And we got some feedback. I remember one teacher said they were, and this kind of goes back to the last panel, there was a teacher that was really on the edge of leaving the program, just overwhelmed. It's already overwhelming being a Hawaiian medium, any language medium teacher, but then you add the pandemic on top of that, and so on and so forth. And this opportunity to be part of a professional learning community and professional resource development community was so powerful for this kumu, and also the quality with which it was taught, that this person found rekindled hope and rekindled energy to carry on. So that's another aspect of it. And yeah, I think lava kela. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui, ke kaianiani. And yeah, one of those things that we get to look back on is another work that Kumulari has done in the past with Kaleo Hawaii. And that's another resource that's found digitally through Kani Āina. So Larry, if you could share a little bit about Kani Āina and how learners can access it, and why you started to create Kani Āina and offer it as a resource.
Yes, Kani Āina is our online repository of documented native speech. So it's an basically audio collection of native speakers, but also we have video as well. We're working, of course, on other collections to add to this, and it's online at Ulukau, or if you can spell Kani Āina, loosely translated as Voices of the Land, because we're now counting less than, outside of the little population of maybe, I don't know, 30 or so speakers from the island of Ni'ihau, and then maybe 15 outside. This is throughout the archipelago or the islands of Hawaii. We need to now use the documentation of their voices. And so this is the challenge for our second language learners, and I'm sure this can be similar situation with other indigenous peoples. So documentation is very important. If you haven't studied it, please do it. It's never too late. Or maybe some of us have already had wax cylinders or dictaphone recordings. However the recordings are there, go and get them, digitize them, make them available for our second language learners, because they just don't step out of the classroom and meet up with a native speaker anymore. Now that's going to be very important in conveying this hokeo ikipili, this source of data or information, to our second language learners. And that is the challenge right now. I never thought I thought I already did my job for 16 years. I conducted this radio show called Kaleo Hawaii once a week for an hour or maybe an hour and a half most of the time, and recording these mostly elders, our kupuna, who are the last of our native speakers. And so we have over 525 hours of that kind of recording on the 7-inch recordings now that have been 7-inch reels that have been digitized. So these are just important resources. And we're beginning now to, hopefully we can get some more kala or some money to begin to incorporate this audio into more such as podcasts or something like that, more current use of our media, our social media, or our technology here, creative media, to incorporate into work that Hale Kuamoʻo stands for in supplying our ongoing curriculum, and curriculum means also to get our second language speakers more fluent. And I'm talking about, our teachers are second language speakers, our children are second language speakers, but of course we're counting parents. We just saw uh, people like the Hartmans, Pele and her family, and numerous others who have taken it upon themselves to say, we're going to be speaking only Hawaiian at our home and create new language, Hawaiian language speakers, Hawaiian, I should say, native Hawaiian language speakers. So the standard is we have the recordings and we need to try and beef up our language to meet those kinds of standards as best as possible in this whole effort of revitalization. So that's Kani Āina kind of in a nutshell. There's all kinds of concerns with, in using our cultural information that's documented in this speech. It's so rich of with information, not just language, but cultural information, historical information. So there's a whole treasure chest. Mr. Erwin Kekai Aniani and the staff at Kahale Kuamoʻo. And yes, indeed, I support that. Luckily, we have our little portable building called Kahale Kuamoʻo right below our college building. So we are in proximity. And that's so important, I think, for language revitalization to have this kind of, luckily we have a physical proximity, but also we have to be together, because in working we're a small group, but we want to get bigger. And so that kind of relationship and unity and lokahi, laulima, is very important, working together. But the repositories, I'd like to see more of our state of Hawaii. Hawaii was very much known for its literacy rate in our own language. So we have tons of material that are written at the Judiciary Building or at the State Archives or at the Bishop Museum or wherever they are. Another thing is to begin to gather them into a repository for language revitalization. Language, we have to use that to continue to be the foundational work for the evolvement. And when I say evolvement, I mentioned earlier that, we have to also progress in creating new words, especially when we meet the demand of what is current curriculum being taught, what are the standards of math and science, etc. In our philosophy of Hawaiian approach to incorporating the Hawaiian perspective in dealing with education. And another thing I want to mention is I know Kekai Aniani, you folks did a project with the Kamehameha schools for third and fourth graders on our own Hawaiian biology. Here in Hawaii is so rich, being that we are in a very isolated group of islands in the middle of this vast ocean. We have a very unique science to our biology, and I understood that the whole list of and they're all former students of Kahakaula, many of them, not all of them, I would say about 80%, were the writers of that beautiful, and Kekai Aniani, you can explain about that a little bit more, but it was written in Hawaiian first. That is the goal. We're talking about translating from English to Hawaiian, but now we are moving into writing first in Hawaiian, and that's it. And then if people want to translate into English, they can. But grounding our new writers, our new speakers of Hawaiian in the culture and the language is so important, to be involved in beginning to use our language in creating the curriculum from our perspective. I wanted to say that some of these words that we created we have a Hawaiian lexicon committee, were kind of exciting for us because we're using creativity, creating these words from concepts that were already embedded in our traditional culture and putting it together and then presenting it to these authors to use. Because now Kekayaniani has to give me some examples of these hyperbolic scientific words that we put into our scientific Hawaiian words, right? And Keka, you turn on
Yeah.
your mic.
Hikino, Hikino. So here, I'm worried these are going to disappear into my background, but here's an example of what Larry was just talking about. So this book here was the original book, and I mentioned Kaho'olawe a minute ago in reference to my colleague Ikaaka Nahuiwai, who couldn't make it. This is a very important island culturally. And so you can see this word here, waiaea, was one of the lexical items that we took to our lexicon committee. Hey, Larry, how can we say a dry land forest ecosystem? And
Right.
so
And
it
we
goes,
have a lot of dryland forest ecosystems.
yeah, it's one of the more endangered ecosystems of our place. So we drafted the book originally in Hawaiian, and this is another full circle story, because what we did after, because we were working with Kamehameha Publishing, and they are not an immersion program, but they're more and more supportive of our Hawaiian immersion and actually thinking of doing some kind of dual language within their school system. So they took it to the next step, which is translating from Hawaiian to English, which is really nice because, like we mentioned earlier about the cut and paste from, English trade books to Hawaiian. So now we have, at least in the case of this project, we have Hawaiian language influencing English education. And that book, the second book that I showed you, we intentionally kept a really lot of Hawaiian terminology in there. And this is an example of that set that's been republished. So and I mentioned earlier about Kukuluku Mohana. That was kind of based on this project we did with our colleagues at Kamehameha Publishing. We did the same sort of leveling protocols that we use for this project. It's called Kahana Āina Lupa Lupa, Flourishing Landscape of Literacy, we call it.
Yeah, kind of focusing a lot on our biology, I guess, of Hawaii. Yeah, our weather, our natural fauna and zoology and all of that, which is so rich here in Hawaii,
Yes.
and it's so rich embedded in our own culture as well. So that's fabulous. And I,
No, hiki o ke ho'omau, ke kahi manao.
and I was just going to add that we have all of that on audio as well, a lot of it. So now we're so familiar with, this kind of visual, I mean, how do you say, writing, but we don't use enough of our ears, and we need to, because we can't just bump into a native speaker like that. And, that would be perfect if we could do, maybe we can create I don't know what they call that. I hope I'm not using a derogatory word, but a made up native speaker with the actual native speech. I don't want to get into that too much, because my gosh, with this kind of technology as it advances, the sky is the limit. So, I can see so much more being developed from the audio point of view as well. And we're talking about Kani Āina.
Yeah. Maika Iloa, I think it's really beautiful how the two of you wove together that mo'okua, or that history, and it's actually still in progress, right? Being further developed from the okituko, the cut and paste, trying to translate into curriculum that was developed in an English and Western perspective, to now having speakers who are creating curriculum that are unique to a Hawaiian worldview, that are created first through Hawaiian and then maybe in English if necessary, and then amplifying the resources that have been documented and created, and finding new life for them and new ways in which they can continue to support language efforts in new ways. So mahalo nui to the both of you for the work. Kumulari, great example of the work never being done. Mahalo nui for reminding us that the work is never done. And I actually saw a question come by in the chat that was really interesting that I wanted to pose to the two of you. If there's a way that you folks have been recording how much people are accessing these types of resources. So I know that there are schools that Hale Kuamoʻo sends out curriculum to. So maybe if you could share a little bit about that, Ke Kaianiani, and the type of impact that Hale Kuamoʻo has in the state. And then if there's anything that you want to add to that as well, feel free.
I'll just quickly go because I know Larry will have more to share. But so for the Kukulukun Mohana project, we printed 20,000 books of just of those two sets. And I never mentioned our family literacy resources, which is another 6 titles. And of those 20,000 books, almost all of them went right out the door, free of charge to all of our programs. We have a couple hundred left of each title. Also, we tracked, I mentioned the audio ebook versions, which are digital. We tried to control the initial dissemination through a Google form survey just to get a sense of how widely they were being shared. And those quickly got into the tens of thousands of teachers sharing them to Ohana and to all of their students and whatnot. So, but I'm curious to hear Larry's answer about Kani Āina and the tracking of that.
Well, we have Bob Stafford doing that, and it's very rewarding to know that it's being used entirely, well, mostly during the school days, from Monday to Friday, the school hours, and that's proving to us the target audience that we want to get to, of course, which are, of course, our Hawaiian medium schools, our Hawaiian young new speakers coming up, as well as at our tertiary or university level. And we want to encourage more of that. So we need to get involved in using that kind of data more, as I was saying, maybe through podcasts and other kinds of curriculum development work. And this is where we have to engage and we kind of look at our more adult type students, which we call university students. We can look at high school students and even maybe intermediate age students to begin to do this kind of engage in this kind of work, but on a very strong foundation of language. And sometimes there's not enough time in the College of Arts and Sciences, earning a bachelor's degree and earning a master's degree and earning even a PhD degree to learn everything through a degree program. There is so much more to be done. And I think that's another effort that we're trying to do here in Hawaii, is to establish other means to strengthen the knowledge of our culture and language at the foundational level so that it can be employed with some sense of accountability to our people, to the standards of our own people. When I say our own people, I mean from where we come from the foundations of our traditions. So that's very important as well.
We have 2 questions, and
Sure.
actually we're hitting the end of our panel, but maybe we can address these 2 questions before we wrap up.
Sure.
And Larry, you were actually on the track going into answering this question. So I'll pose this question to you. In terms of language acquisition by today's speakers, whether new native speakers or adult second language learners, what do you hope the Ulukau recordings will provide? For example, do you see people using them as models for pronunciation or syntax structure or semantic, pragmatic context? What is your mana'o on that?
Well, there's a kind of a range, because basically that the right now the documentations have been like interviews, right? Interviews that were recorded. And often, and we also, in my radio program, we would have our last natives, the stronghold of native speakers, the community from the island, the privately owned island of Niihau, young little children, 4 or 5 years old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old sometimes, and a few teenagers as well. So we have a conversation of a range of domains, well, not domains, but I guess you call them registers of use of language, documentation, as well as adults, of course, in all different forms. We had we opened up our show to telephone calls as well, that kind of interaction. So there's a rich documentation of that kind of knowledge, language knowledge, to be incorporated, to be developed and made, uh, because nowadays, you just turn on a tape recorder, you hear for hours of it, and you get tired, your ears get tired. You have to know how to listen to native speech and acquire the skills. And this is what we have to work on. But fortunately, we have some of that we can work on, and that's the next thing we're delving into actually right now.
Mahalo. Ke Kaianiani, how about you? What are your hopes, for the Ulukau recordings or even the other products that Hale Kuamo is putting out? What are your hopes on what it can do to impact future language efforts?
I just want to close by supporting something Larry just said, which is the importance of really good oral language models and using the ear more and the eyes less. Because the eye is the path to reading and writing. And in our Western-based system of education, that's very important, but it may be overemphasized. So coming back to this issue of justice, it's really important. And I was just at a workshop on Oahu with a number of other immersion educators about how can we better assess our students for their oral language ability. So in order to get better, they need to have good models like the Kani Āina database. And also I mentioned our audio ebooks, that was led by Professor Kalena Silva. So the level of language and pronunciation is really good. Maybe not Manaleo good, but very close in some cases, especially the ones that Kalena narrated and did the chants for. So I think probably that's true for a lot of indigenous languages, is figuring out a way within our Western biased educational system that we can emphasize listening and speaking more and more. And that in that way, the language will continue to grow stronger.
Nani, mahalo. We do have one last question, and it might take off into, it could be a really long answer, but we'll try and ask if it can be synthesized a little bit. And then if people have more questions, feel free to reach out to Kekayaniani and Larry. So this is the second question that was asked. And maybe Larry, you can finish us off with this question. How do kupuna or native speakers respond to old or new vocabulary?
Well, actually, it's rare to bump into a kupuna nowadays who can be speaking in Hawaiian, but I have bumped into a few, and they are not aware that they're using new vocabulary. They're not aware because I don't know where they got it from, how they got it. Because for us, the mainstream is for our new generation through the efforts of Hawaiian language revitalization, which is the medium of education. So these are young people, but you're saying our old people. Yeah, but if they bump into new words, that's the positive side, that they don't know that they're using a new word. But if they come across a new word that they don't know, then they'll say, you know. But then you ask them to come up, because we did a lexicon committee only with native speakers, what we call kupuna, our elders. And we would say, well, how would we come up with this word? We need a word for evolution. And then they'll go, and then they'll give you the definition in Hawaiian, if they know what it means. Evolution means, oh, this is a great definition. What about a word? It's very difficult. It was very difficult for our native speakers to do that. And so here we go, in a revitalization stage, almost extinct, endangered. What are we going to do? We need a word. We want a word for this and for that and for this, and we want it fast. We're so behind. Gosh, but we'll work on it. We just have to work on it. And we'll have to do a catch up on evolution. We'll have to catch up on evolving the words. We can't just wait for it. We'll have to speed it up. And hopefully it'll be okay. And we do the darndest, we want to make sure that it sounds okay, sounds Hawaiian, it feels Hawaiian, all of that, kind of stuff. But we also have to we have an advantage to help our students learn that if you can recognize that new word, it has a lot of meaning in it. Liliu loli, liliu eve, liliu velo. We created 3 words for evolution right there after that request came through, because we have evolution by genes, and then we have evolution by my new Honda out there. It's not like the old one. And then we have here in Hawaii what they call adaptive radiation. That sounds so dangerous because of our isolation here. So, gosh, we're stepping up into creating the words that we would love to have to talk about.
Mahalo nui. I think that's a great ending point into the next panel that talks about, expanding into new domains and how do we do that with our ʻŌlelo. So with that, mahalo nui ia ʻolua e ke kaianiani me kuleri no keia wā kuka kamailio ana.
Mahalo ia oi kule.
Ai, mahalo. Mahalo nui kia kuka kame i leo ana. Ahui ho.